See, earlier people were focused on treatment more because everybody thought that's where the money should be spent. So people have a disease, you treat them and you've done your job without understanding that that's not the fundamental issues. So that awareness was not very strong, as you rightly said, although the diagnostic industry was growing when we started our project. But when COVID came, I think it shook people completely. For TB and other diseases, you don't see it every day in front of you. And so you don't realize the impact of not diagnosing, right? But COVID, everybody was involved and everybody was affected in some way or the other. And then they felt the acute importance of diagnosing and confirming that they have COVID. So that changed the thought process completely. So today, even a common man thinks of diagnostics first. That was not there before.
And I think everybody today wants to utilize the tools available at their disposal. And it is up to us to make those tools available. And decentralization, as Sriram said, I think is very critical because all of us are not going to be in facilities or in places where we have access to centralized facilities. So I think that is the change.
We moved from a very empirical model of medicine to a more evidence-based model of medicine. And I think that is the next stage. And I think it's also, if I see, there's been a generational shift where the new generations expect more in terms of evidence-based, because I mean, they're dealing with data everywhere. Right? So joining us first is Sriram Natarajan, Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer of Molbio Diagnostics. Joining him is Dr Chandrasekhar Nair, Director and Chief Technology Officer of Molbio Diagnostics and co-founder of MedTech Labs. You guys are dealing with investors day in and day out. What do you think really investors should look for in building a very sustainable and long-term MedTech company? What should investors really focus on?
I think investors should look at, first of all, the capability of the company as a team. So it's not just innovation, it's not just differentiation a product, but it's also scaling up, go to market, and what markets are we addressing, right? Not just look at one innovation as a standalone kind of a thing to say it's going to be breakthrough and so I'm going to invest money, because it may not finally see the light of the day, right? But they're able to offer better solutions, create better impact stories that will always have a longer life.
I think in India, the biggest challenge is drop price to get market share. I mean, that is the pain of the industry. I think, like you said, the only way you can keep yourself away from that is have something which is innovative where you can drive things.
I believe that investors should look at the intensity of purpose and your ability to create that impact. These are the two things that investors really need to focus on.
I think at the end of the day, if you're in the right direction, you just need time to really build it. India is looked at in healthcare as more and more of a manufacturing hub also. What would you tell a global investor about India's diagnostic and medtech story, and where should he focus on, how he should look at things?
See, India has a lot of things positively going for it. Number one, we have a very large scientific manpower pool, which is still not properly tapped, right? And on top of that, we are able to design, develop and manufacture at much lower cost than most of the economies can do. So that way, there is an economy factor coming in the picture for even making very high quality products. Only thing India lacks is the ecosystem, like I said.
But today, if I had to say that, okay, if you to say, let me look at it and rebuild it in a different way, what would you have done?
In terms of vision, the idea is that if I go to my primary healthcare center, and that could be a Nukkad clinic if you want, I should get best-in-class diagnosis across whatever is needed, and I should get diagnostic-led therapy. I think one of the few companies that are extremely open to collaborations. We have learned a few things along our journey. We have learned what can go wrong in the innovation phase. We have learned what can go wrong when you are trying to only focus on innovation and not focus on scale. So to answer that second part of your question, I think one of the things I would do differently if I were to build this platform again is focus on scale from day one. It would have saved us a lot of pain, and focus on getting somebody like Sriram who understood the other parts of the ecosystem. This complementary skills and talent and the ability to grow is what you need when it comes to medical devices, diagnostic devices, etc. This is a very multidisciplinary area. The opportunities in this area are endless. I think we have a huge need gap and therefore a huge opportunity.
Hello and welcome to Big Idea, where healthcare leadership meets investor insight. I'm your host, Mayur Sirdesai. Healthcare has entered one of the most transformative periods in its history. We often celebrate breakthrough medicines, cutting-edge hospitals, and life-saving treatments. But behind every successful system lies something equally important: the ability to diagnose diseases quickly, accurately, and at the point of care. diagnostics has evolved quietly from being a support function to becoming one of the most critical pillars of modern healthcare. It influences clinical decisions, drives better patient outcomes, strengthens public health systems, and increasingly shapes how investors view the future of healthcare. India is also witnessing a remarkable shift. We are no longer just consumers of healthcare technologies, we are becoming innovators, manufacturers, and global exporters of world class medical solutions. But building a globally respected medtech company is far from easy. It requires scientific innovation, entrepreneurial conviction, patient capital, manufacturing excellence, and years of persistence. Today's episode is about that journey. More importantly, it's about the partnership between science and business. Because breakthrough technologies only create impact when they successfully reach the people who need them. And that's exactly what our guests have spent the last 2 decades building. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome two pioneers who have played a defining role in shaping India's molecular diagnostics ecosystem. Joining us first is Sriram Natarajan, Executive Director and Chief Executive Officer of Molbio Diagnostics, with more than 35 years of experience across research, manufacturing, commercialization, and business leadership. Mr. Natarajan has been instrumental in transforming Molbio from an ambitious idea to one of the India's most respected medtech companies. His entrepreneurial journey spans decades, including being one of the founders of Tulip Diagnostics, and today he continues to lead Molbio's strategic vision, global expansion, and business growth. Joining him is Dr. Chandrasekhar Nair, Director and Chief Technology Officer of Molbio Diagnostics and co-founder of Big Tech Labs. A scientist, innovator, and technology leader with more than 3 decades experience in medtech and biotech R&D, Dr. Nair has dedicated his career to rapid, portable, and affordable diagnostic technologies. His work has resulted in numerous Indian and international patents and has helped position Molbio among India's leading healthcare innovation companies. Gentlemen, it's an absolute pleasure to have both of you on the big idea. Welcome to both of you.
Thank you.
So, Sriram and Chandy, I think as part of our discussion, I'd like to sort of start with the beginning.
Sure.
You have built, both of you have built one of the most successful diagnostic companies, and you have been in this sort of sector for decades now. We'd like to understand what sort of made you think of Molbio and, the original vision of how did you think that Molbio could become this kind of company, and what is the problem that you were really looking at solving? I mean, I'd sort of like to ask both of you this question.
Before Molbio, I had a company called Tulip Diagnostics, which I had founded with two other partners. So the idea of Tulip also was to make sure that we're able to design and develop technologies which were more relevant to Indian and LMIC clinical requirements, because in those days almost all of diagnostics was imported, mostly coming from Western world, and they were trying to push the Western technologies for Indian requirements, and there was a lot of misfit, as you can say.
Sure.
And so we thought that we should do something in this area. So Tulip started as a company to design, develop technologies which were easily deployable in Indian kind of situations, in tier 3, tier 4 kind of levels also, where healthcare can go down the chain.
Sure.
So while doing this, we had a lot of verticals in the diagnostic space. We were into immunodiagnostics, we were into hematology, immunohematology, biochemistry, microbiology, and so on. But one area we had not touched was molecular diagnostics. It was fundamentally because molecular diagnostics, or the real-time PCR as we call it today, was a very highly centralized kind of a technology, and did not have a lot of clinical relevance, just because it used to take weeks to get a report from a central laboratory. And so nobody used it as a clinical tool. So it was in my mind even at that time that, if somebody can actually develop a point of care kind of a platform which can be deployed lower down the chain, where people can get results quickly, that could be a paradigm change. Simply because molecular diagnostics was the gold standard, was the most reliable and accurate for diagnosing infectious diseases. So this was playing in my mind in Tulip itself. And in fact, I started a small program in Tulip. While doing that, I had gone to attend a conference in Delhi at the ICGB. I still remember that. And I saw Chandy making a presentation, and he was talking about a point of care molecular platform. And I was amazed that somebody is already working in it. And he had a prototype version he will talk about a little more about. And I thought, wow, this is exactly what I was trying to, do. And this could be made into a commercial product. I was very clear in my mind that it was going to be a game-changing solution. And that's how we got together. Maybe Chandy will talk a little bit about how we got there.
Yeah, and I'd like to understand. I mean, at that time, I mean, today itself, it's still not easy to get innovation in India, but this is many, many years ago, right? So, what really made you sort of take that leap or have that leap of faith that you could build something in so innovative in India?
I think this technique, polymerase chain reaction, fascinated me when I was exposed to this as a bench scientist. One of the very few techniques that has extremely high sensitivity and fantastic specificity. So, if a polymerase chain reaction tells you that there is a certain pathogen present, you know for sure that that pathogen is present. And because of its sensitivity, you can diagnose very early. The question was, how do we take this technique and make it available at point of care? And in the very beginning, I think we made up our minds that we want to free up all gold standard diagnostic techniques. In fact, we were much more ambitious to say that these techniques have to be free from the confines of a laboratory and provide independent care, give somebody the ability to diagnose and treat within a single visit, and thereby provide continuous care. Of course, unless it was cost effective, especially in countries like India, it would never be used. And that is the time when the mobile revolution was starting. So we said if we could get connected results, then we would also get connected care. So that was the vision with which we wanted to make the PCR available at point of care. And that is what we were trying to do. It was that journey that Sriram is talking about. And
No, it's true. I think
we started working together.
the way I look at it on two sides. One is Sriram. I mean, it is very rare that somebody who's built one business and sold it goes and builds another one. And I think that's a very, very commendable thing that, to have the passion to build again. Would like to understand how you did that. Second thing I think I'd like to ask both of you is, I mean, with Molbio, you've basically created a market which was not existing in India. So how did you think that, you could build a market and create a market where you could build such a scale company? You're probably today one of the largest, if not the largest diagnostic company in India in a technology which was probably a few years ago was not even known, right? So how did you think? I mean, one thing is being an entrepreneur again. I think that's one. Second thing is to think to build scale into this market. How do you sort of think it? And maybe both of you can sort of answer that.
Yeah, for me, innovation and taking technologies to market is a passion. And I think not only passion just to satisfy myself, but also that it's something which impacts human life significantly, right? Where you're able to actually save lives. So that's where it resonated me more with the molecular platform that Chandy had developed. That this was going to be really a game changer and really going to save a lot of lives, because you will be able to diagnose diseases very early on and put them on the right treatment. So we have two problems, right? One is not being able to diagnose early, which leads to people getting more and more severely affected. But on top of that, such people keep giving the infection to other people. So you're also ensure by this making sure this disease spread much more. And so the disease management becomes a big issue. So early diagnosis and putting people on the right treatment makes a big impact, and also prevents, as you know, drug resistance from coming in. So the multiple, effects of early intervention. So that's what was exciting. So when I saw this, like I said, I thought it was going to be a game changer. If only we could make it into a commercially workable product that meets the requirements that we are targeting, and then put it into the market and scale it up. Because of my previous experience in Tulip, I at least knew the path. We had a learning curve in Tulip, and that learning curve came in quite handy to time things in a much better way. Having said that, it still took a long time. I mean, it wasn't that simple. So even after Chandy had the prototype, and even after we knowing that this should be converted very quickly, we all thought we should be able to be done in a couple of years' time. But It actually took us another 7-8 years. But you just have to go on, that's all.
That's what I actually wanted to ask is that how did you have that patience and that belief to make it happen? Because I mean, this is what whenever we meet young innovators, I think they look at technology as the be all and end all. Right?
Yeah.
And a lot of times we say that's not the only piece. To build a company requires so much more, and you need patience and perseverance to do that. So I think you guys have demonstrated that. So I'd like to understand what gave you the faith that this will happen. Because again, you were building in a market, you were not grabbing market share, you were creating a market.
Absolutely. The key point that Sriram talked about is focus on impact. And I think, see, life shapes you, correct? When I was in Pilani as a student, every year we used to see somebody die because they could not understand whether this was typhoid or malaria, two diseases that present with similar symptoms and completely different clinical paths in terms of treatment. So we knew that if we could create a platform like PCR that is so versatile and make it available where it is the most needed, then we would be able to solve for some of these problems. Having said that, um, I personally and my team did not have a concept of what beyond innovation, and that is to your point that most of us are technology focused when we start with innovation. But we also had some realism built in. We knew that we had to take a systems engineering approach, it had to be sample to result, etc., etc. But even that was not enough. What we really lack is an understanding of how do we take precision technology to scale. And that is something that we had to develop that expertise ground up. That is what
I
took
know.
time.
I've seen you do up your own customized machines for everything.
Yes, that is what took time. And then, of course, this is also an area that requires a lot of patience. Regulation is something that we have to go through. Regulation is there primarily to ensure the quality of your product. Our own quality standards had to be built. Our own understanding of how to transition to scale had to be built. And then those had to be deployed. And that's what took time.
True. Well, I think it's the way I've seen your journey. I mean, it was the real belief that you were doing making a difference. I think and I'd like to talk you guys to talk to about the whole TB program that you've worked on. I mean, to believe that you can create a very differentiated ecosystem of screening diagnostics to basically provide the treatment was not sort of delved in a great way in India earlier. So I'd like to sort of you to cover that piece also, where how you really decided to use the real-time PCR to really get there, because at that time nobody really had thought through this whole concept also.
So the vision was to make sure that we have a platform which can work completely independent of a laboratory, where you can do molecular diagnostics in very remote places and be able to diagnose diseases right next to the patient. So the entire technology development that we did was focused on that. So it had to be portable, lightweight, battery operated, automated, easy to use. So all that were already factored in while we were building the product, right? So then we are clear that if this gets deployed at the community level, in the primary healthcare kind of level, that's where the biggest impact is that it's going to have, and for multiple diseases. So while we are deciding the disease profile and which ones we should prioritize on, is when we realized TB had a big issue, a big crying need. And this also comes from my experience with WHO, where I had been in some panels of WHO, and I got to understand that people were struggling with tuberculosis only because the method that was being used in the DOTS program, as it's called spear microscopy, was only 50% sensitive. So almost half the people who came with TB never got diagnosed. So while this program has been going on for 3-4 decades, and people were getting diagnosed and treated free of cost by the government of India and other countries, for example, not only India but all the TB burdened countries, TB never came down. And the question was why. And so became very clear that the problem was diagnosis. And the people who don't get diagnosed are the ones who go back to the community and give TB to other people. So that's where the realization came that if we can have a much better point of care solution, that would be what will change TB management in future.
Got it.
So with our platform, we knew that we can do infectious disease at primary level. So if you could do a TB test and do it at the primary level, that will be a real impact story. So we focused on TB, and the government also supported us when we went to ICMR and said this is what we want to do. They showed a lot of interest and said, yes, we'll support you. So we worked on a TB test and worked on also building the automated version of the machines. So we got ready with all that, and then ICMR did a very large validation. So it was a multi site validation initially, but it also extended to actually putting it in primary centers and seeing the kind of impact it's going to get. Probably one of the largest validations I've ever known. About 22,000 samples were tested, and the platform worked well, and everybody was happy. And they said, we should roll it out. I mean, this is what is going to make a difference. And WHO also at the same time had seen our platform. So they also did a multi-country study through an agency called FIND. And the multi-country study also culminated in our getting a WHO endorsement. And we are the only, we were and we are still the only second company in the world to have a WHO endorsement for a TB test. So all that happened at the same time, and India rolled it out first without even waiting for WHO. And now today, I think almost 80% of the TB testing in India happens on our platform.
Wow.
Yeah, many things came together. Of course, Sriram's experience with tuberculosis. My research team was initially a little hesitant because it's a challenging problem. The sputum as a sample itself has very different physics from blood, and the potential for infection, the unknown, which TB is, even to scientists like us at that point in time. So all of these were challenges, but we got a lot of support. The platform itself was initially built with soft loans from CSIR's limited program. Then DBT's BIPP program supported this. ICMR was super supportive. I would like to specifically call out Dr. Soumya Swaminathan, who was then director as NIRT, and Dr. Katoch, who was then the ICMR Director General. So they were very supportive in the fact that we should develop this. And yes, it was a challenge. Yes, we had to work towards making this happen with a difficult sample time, but everything came together to make it happen. And as Sriram said, ICMR's role first in the India validation and then with the international validation, where they worked together with WHO, was fantastic. We generated the evidence that was required for a product from India for the first time to be used for a problem that is very severe in India and the rest of the global south.
Got it. I agree with you. I think we've seen that is that the government has really stepped up in terms of providing care, especially in diseases which have been forgotten or in lower tier markets where, I mean, through even the PPP projects which have come in or in Ayushman Bharat, I mean, we've seen a lot of work happening in that market and private players sort of working in hand with government sort of agencies to provide significant level of care in those markets.
Yes, but having said that, I must also say that, okay, with that level of support, it would have been impossible for us to deliver this platform. I think Sriram's entire journey and his conviction, very strong conviction that we will be able to deliver this, and his conviction to put his money where his thought was.
I think that is one of the most important things.
Which is the most important thing for us to be having, for us to have sustained that journey of development. It's not easy.
No, it was really a 10-year journey at least.
Yeah, almost a 14-year journey, right? And the kind of money that goes into it is crazy. So by the time we had actually commercialized the product, we had already spent about 400 crores on the project, right? So that's the kind of money it takes if you really want to push.
Yeah, I think that was the conversation we just had. Right?
If you want to have down level innovation and if you want to take it and scale it up, you need money, right? So that is one thing which is sadly lacking in our ecosystem. So fortunately, because had money from Tulip, and then I sold Tulip later on. So got money from that sale of Tulip. All that went to fund Molbio. But had it not been there, it would have been a big struggle. It would maybe we would not be where we are today, right?
So I think in India, that is the critical part, right? Taking innovation to another level requires capital, a significant capital, which is unfortunately not easily available. I mean, you had the ability to fund it yourself, but if people have to look outside, it is not so easy to really build on that. But I think, like you said, if you've got the capital and you've got the patience to build it, you can do something wondrous in, and not just fighting India. This carries forward to many other markets which are similar to India, like emerging markets. Right? So
Yeah. And on top of that, I think perseverance and getting committed to what you're doing is extremely important.
Yes.
In our journey, there's so many people who said it's not going to happen. So many people would say, why are you wasting your time? This is not going to work. It's not going to happen, right? Not only in India, even outside of India. But just to still keep believing in yourself and believing in what you can do, I think it's not as easy as it sounds.
I think that's a true entrepreneurial journey is in terms of believing Tarvo concept.
And I want to come back to the patient capital bit more, because I think this is one aspect that is missing. The government can only do so much. They can do that initial bit of de-risking. But where is the patient capital in India? And why is it that we are so afraid of failure? Why is it that we believe that if we dream big and if we don't achieve, that is the end of the world? Okay? There is so much learning from every activity that we can do. Some of these things I think we must sit back and think a little more deeply about and see how we can build this ecosystem better.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, where science is involved and where you need time to really build something, we rarely see the support happening from private investors. I mean, we tend to sort of look for quick wins. I think even I'm from a lot from the pharma industry, and we've seen Indian pharma not innovate as much as they could have because they were always looking at quick commercializations. But today, now you're really seeing that advent. I think you guys have been front runners to that, but now you're slowly seeing people be aware of it. Now, again, how much capital will be available still, we don't know, but at least that awareness is there that we need to build innovation.
Yeah.
We can't anymore be V2s all the time to work with. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
I think shifting to sort of the diagnostic industry as a whole, I think pre-COVID, I think Indian sort of the healthcare industry was pharma on one side, hospitals on the other. And these are more treatment related, right? And then suddenly COVID hit. I think you saw a huge change post COVID. I think people, PCR, which was not unknown, became a household name, right? And which was sort of unheard of that something like this could happen. But what do you see changed in terms of the whole attitude, mindness? Because we saw a lot more screening, diagnostic, all that. So the whole continuum of care sort of came into play. You guys were there at that time. You were already in this industry. What have you seen post that? I mean, in terms of how people look at this whole industry, because today diagnostics is considered as big an industry as a hospital or a pharmaceutical industry, and it actually if I look at the MedTech industry as a whole, diagnostics is probably the one which is the largest and really driving it. Whether it is imaging or pathology or whatever, the whole place that is really driving that. So, what do you think changed, and how do you think that will really go forward in the future?
See, earlier people were focused on treatment more because everybody thought that's where the money should be spent. So people have a disease, you treat them, and you've done your job, without understanding that that's not the fundamental issue. The fundamental issue is getting the infection or the disease itself, right? So that awareness was not very strong, as you rightly said, although the diagnostic industry was growing. And when we started our project, we already had a fairly decent diagnostics industry, not the way it was post-COVID, but definitely building, right? And even the need for TB and other things are already there. But when COVID came, I think it shook people completely, because for TB and other diseases, you don't see it every day in front of you. And so you don't realize the impact of not diagnosing, right? But COVID, everybody was involved, and everybody was affected in some way or the other, and everybody was relating to the disease. And then they felt the acute importance of diagnosing and confirming that you have COVID. So that changed the thought process completely. So today, even a common man thinks of diagnostics first, right? That was not there before. So that way, I think COVID has shaken up, I would say, the world. And also the realization that you need to have diagnostics where people require it and not just depend only on a completely centralized model. So even if you see the US and Western European markets suffered as badly or if not more with COVID, only because the health systems are very centralized.
Sure.
So they just couldn't reach the COVID testing to primary level, kind of where it was required. So those kind of thought processes have changed. Now people really understand the importance of, you know, capacity building, as they call it, or pandemic preparedness, as now that spoke about, and which it means that you have to be ready at all levels. So that change has definitely happened, and that's driving the overall diagnostics industry also.
I think pre-COVID, healthcare was a very private subject. It was between you and your doctor. And some of us have been very fortunate to have some really good doctors who are able to understand what's wrong with you, treat you.
Without diagnostic.
Without access. And it is very unfair for us to expect that when they see diseases that present almost similarly, that they make the right judgment call every time. And that is not a scalable model. When you start looking at public health, and that is what COVID really did, it put a focus on public health. It showed us that we are doing the wrong thing. That unless you have diagnostic-led therapy, you don't have a faster return to wellness. In fact, you have so many other problems like antibiotic abuse, antimicrobial resistance, which is becoming one of the biggest problems that is challenging us today. So that is what is the change. And I think everybody today wants to utilize the tools available at their disposal. So they need the tools. And it is up to us to make those tools available. And decentralization, as Sriram said, I think is very critical. Because all of us are not going to be in facilities or in places where we have access to centralized facilities.
I agree. I think
That is the change.
we moved from a very empirical model of medicine to a more evidence-based model of medicine.
Correct.
That is the stage. And I think it's also, if I see, also there's been a generational shift where the new generations expect more in terms of evidence-based, because I mean they're dealing with data everywhere, right? So even here they're no longer ready to say a doctor just looked at me and said, this must be their issue. I think that has changed. Also, let me ask you one thing. I mean, one thing which we've seen post-COVID is the biggest change which has happened is preventive care in India. India, preventive care was non-existent. I mean, healthcare was a self-pay market. Insurers were not there. Now we're slowly seeing insurance coming. But what we're really seeing is people spending time and effort on preventive care. And then, it could be diagnostics, it could be dietary needs, all that, but with the intent that I need to be healthy or there will be exercises. The whole concept has changed. How do you think that will sort of drive this industry going forward? I mean, because one is just for supporting treatments, but now you're also putting a whole new lens to it, and it's actually a much larger market to address. Right? So, how do you look at it?
Yeah, so that's like you rightly said, people have become much more aware that it's not just, getting sick and going to a doctor or, seeking a diagnosis. It's also to monitor yourself early on, that even before you get sick, you're able to understand the underlying conditions, can help you and your health better. Is something which definitely is gotten into people's mind. And post-COVID, it's become even more acute. And so you can see that the health-seeking behavior is changing. And that is good for the industry because that's what will drive the industry. But that's important also at the same time, because then you are able to treat people even before they actually develop very advanced disease. And that is the objective of diagnosis, right? Early diagnosis. So that's panning out the way. And now we are entirely getting into a new area called screening. So diagnostics is when you diagnose a condition, when somebody presents with the condition.
Sure.
But screening is when you go and look for people who may not be presenting
Absolutely.
any symptoms, but you're still screening them. For example, now we are working on a breast cancer screening solution. where normal women should be getting tested on a regular basis. A very simple device which can be done at a point of care kind of a thing, and can tell you if there is any abnormality. And then those people can further go for higher level of investigation. But at least you're pulling people who would otherwise not come into the system,
Absolutely.
right? So that those kind of things are now coming up, and they all, I think, as we go along, will also become huge drivers of the industry as well as innovation in the long run.
Yeah, I think the journey from managing illness has shifted to maintaining wellness, and we are seeing that play out in our own domains. For example, how can I use a simple blood test to know far more than what the blood test was meant to do? True. Can I pick up diseases much earlier, whether it is metabolic diseases, whether it is lifestyle diseases or infectious diseases, and ensure that that needle is maintained at the wellness level too. Is I think the big shift that we are seeing.
I think one of the things which we've seen is also, if you see, diagnostics was pretty much initially, like you said, centralized, right? Like we keep seeing it shifting to smaller labs, smaller, finally reaching home.
Yes.
I think you guys are in that domain of point of care.
Yeah.
Where do you see this? I mean, our reading is that it will soon not just be a diagnostics and a doctor driven, but it'll also be consumer driven, because people will sort of address things much faster. And so real technologies which go into the home, it will really drive overall healthcare in the future. So how do you look at that?
So home testing has been spoken about for a long time, but excepting for a few conditions, it has not found a lot of favor, because what would a person do if they test positive, right? Even for HIV, for that matter, a lot of discussions have gone around whether we should have a home test, right? The question is, if somebody tests and comes positive,
How do you address?
what happens to the person? You know how they get psychologically affected by it, and it can lead to people even committing suicides and becoming depressive unless they get counseled properly. So then the push for home testing was sort of slowed down, saying that it's better not to have a home test, but make it accessible so that people can have access to it with a proper support system. So things like a pregnancy test, it's fine. I mean, you can do at home, it's fine. But even then, you will still go to a gynecologist.
You won't stop there.
Yeah, you won't stop there. But other diseases, whether you should have a home test is still a question mark. The world has not yet been able to answer this question, and how you support them. Maybe today with AI and with so many other advances happening, probably that will assist in the process. But as of today, point of care testing is becoming more of a favorite topic than home testing. Yeah. So
What really excites me about this is AI. As we continue to develop more and more small connected devices that can do much more than what the early generation used to do, how do you consolidate all of this data and this concept of this digital twin that possibly can act like your family doctor? Uh, that concept has gone, but can a digital twin really play that role and help you maintain your health? Is something that's very exciting, isn't it?
So it's a completely different realm, right?
Yes, actually,